Welcome to the Deep Dive. You probably think you know the story of the U-boat war, right? That terrifying cat-and-mouse game beneath the Atlantic waves. But what if I told you that much of what we think we know is, well, steeped in myth, carefully crafted propaganda, even decades of secrecy?
Exactly.
Today, we're plunging into the early, really tumultuous years of the U-boat war. We're talking right from its clandestine origins before World War II through that shocking drumbeat offensive off the American coast in early '42.
It's a period that's far more complex, I think, and contradictory, and frankly more human than the legends often suggest.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to try and cut through some of that fog of war. We want to reveal the surprising truths, the pivotal moments, those technological leaps, and the often overlooked human stories that really shape this critical phase of the war.
And we're leaning heavily on a really authoritative source for this, Clay Blair's Hitler's U-boat war. It's one of the most, well, uncensored histories out there.
All right, so picture this. A world on the brink, naval power is paramount, and this new terrifying weapon is about to just redefine global conflict. Okay, let's get into it. So the popular story, the narrative of the U-boat war, was skewed right from the beginning, wasn't it? Both sides had reasons to kind of exaggerate things.
Definitely. It's fascinating, actually. You had the Third Reich's propaganda machine going full throttle, glorifying the German submariners, making them into these almost mythical figures.
Okay.
But then on the other side, Allied propagandists were amplifying the U-boat danger, often for their own strategic reasons, maybe to build support at home or nudge the Americans closer to joining the war.
Right.
So the end result was this wildly distorted picture of what was actually happening in the Atlantic.
And that distortion, it didn't just vanish when the war ended, it lingered.
Not at all. In fact, Washington, London, Ottawa, they put this tight embargo on captured German U-boat records.
Oh, why?
Well, mainly to hide the secrets of codebreaking. It played a huge role, but nobody knew that then.
Okay, so that created a vacuum.
A massive information vacuum, yeah. And it got filled by histories from German figures. People like Wolfgang Frank, even Karl Dönitz himself, the U-boat commander.
Right, and they weren't exactly going to downplay their own side story.
Precisely. So their mythology kind of took hold, and even the official Allied naval historians like Roskill or Morrison, they were hampered. They didn't have access to the German records because of the security embargo, and frankly, some seemed a bit unfamiliar with submarine tech. So proper authoritative histories, they couldn't really write them for decades.
So for a long time, the German version of events held sway. That seems incredible. This is where someone like Clay Blair comes in, I assume. He aimed to fix that.
Exactly. Blair had served on a U.S. submarine, the Guardfish, during the war. That sparked a deep interest.
Personal experience.
Right. And it led to his big 1975 work, Silent Victory, about the U.S. sub-war against Japan. That was really the first full, uncensored history of the Pacific submarine war. So his commitment was to getting the uncensored truth out there. That's why his Atlantic book, the one we're using, is so valuable. He dug deep.
Okay, let's rewind a bit then. This U-boat menace didn't just appear overnight. It had a backstory, right? Starting with the torpedo itself.
Indeed. The original Whitehead torpedo, it wasn't an immediate sensation, but then came improvements, bigger, more powerful, longer range, and crucially, Ludwig Obre's gyroscope.
Gyroscope? For what?
Directional control, keeping it on course. That got the naval authorities much more interested, and the idea started to grow that, hey, maybe small, cheap boats firing these things could take out expensive battleships. That led to torpedo boats, and eventually torpedo-firing destroyers.
But using submarines specifically for attacking merchant ships, the whole guerre de course idea, that created huge problems, legally and morally.
Massive problems. You had these established prize laws from, well, a more civilized era of warfare.
Right, like rules of engagement.
Exactly. You had to stop a merchant ship, check its papers, see if it's friend, foe, or neutral, do a visit and search. Only then, if it was an enemy ship or carrying contraband, could you potentially sink it.
But even then, you had to ensure the crew was safe.
Absolutely paramount. No sinking without warning. But how do you do that with a submarine, a fragile vessel that relies on stealth? It just didn't work. It fundamentally clashed with the technology.
The World War I must have just blown those rules apart.
Completely. Think about the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915. Over 1,000 dead, including many Americans.
Yeah, huge outcry.
Massive moral indignation. The New York Times basically called U-boat crews savages. The pressure was so intense, the Kaiser actually called off the unrestricted blockade of Britain for a while in late 1915.
Wow, so what did the Allies learn from that first round with the U-boats, things they used later?
Oh, critical lessons. ASW anti-submarine warfare really started to evolve. New weapons like the depth charge came along in 1916.
Were they effective right away?
Not really. Only sank 2 U-boats that year. But they got much better later. More importantly, though, was radio intelligence.
Room 40.
That's the one. The British got hold of German codebooks, and German radio security was, frankly, appalling. Room 40 basically read their mail. By early 1915, they knew almost everything, where the U-boats were, where they were going.
So they could just route ships away from them.
Precisely. They could steer convoys clear of known U-boat positions. It was a huge advantage.
And the convoy system itself.
Yeah.
You mentioned convoys. That sounds like it was maybe the biggest countermeasure.
It was a game changer, absolutely. There's this quote from a German U-boat skipper, remembering how convoys just robbed the U-boat of its chance to be decisive.
How so?
Well, imagine. You're a lone U-boat out there. You see nothing for days, weeks maybe. Then suddenly, bang, a huge group of ships, 30, 50, sometimes more, all steaming together, surrounded by warships.
A much tougher target.
Way tougher. You might sink 1, maybe 2, if you're lucky and skilled. But the rest of the convoy just sails on. The numbers show it. By 1918, losses in convoy were down by 2/3 compared to ships sailing alone. Huge difference.
Okay, so the lessons were there. But then came the interwar period. Germany, under the Versailles Treaty, wasn't even allowed submarines. But that didn't stick, obviously.
Not once Hitler came to power, no. I mean, there were international efforts, the London Naval Treaty, disarmament conferences. The U.S. even proposed limiting subs, but Germany was already rearming in secret.
Sneaky.
Very. Admiral Rader, he was head of the Navy. He envisioned a new U-boat force. They even set up a submarine school disguised as an anti-submarine school. Cause a bit of deception, that.
And then Hitler just dropped the pretense.
Yep. Spring of 1935, he renounced the Versailles Treaty, announced conscription, a new air force, the Luftwaffe, bold moves.
But he also signed a naval agreement with Britain. That seemed contradictory.
It does, but Britain was keen on appeasement then. The Anglo-German Naval Agreement actually limited Germany's submarine tonnage on paper and made them sign the submarine protocol, again, barring surprise attacks on merchant ships.
So, promises they didn't intend to keep.
Well, Hitler kept assuring Rader that war with Britain was unthinkable. And believe it or not, many senior German naval officers, they thought sonar and modern aircraft had made U-boats obsolete, especially near the British Isles.
But not Karl Dönitz. He had very different ideas, didn't he? The man who would lead the U-boat.
Oh, completely different view. Dönitz was a U-boat veteran from World War I. He was convinced that the old Imperial Navy's small U-boat force had come this close to winning a war with a blockade.
So his argument was,
build U-boats, lots of them. Forget the expensive battleships and cruisers. Focus on subs, authorize unrestricted warfare right from the start, and Germany could win. He pushed this, but the high command, the OKM, they basically told him to shut up.
But he's still got to build a force, even a small, and train them relentlessly. Those first boats, the Ducks, what were they like?
The Type 2s, yeah. Small coastal boats, really commissioned in 1935, mostly for training. Dönitz ran the Wettingen flotilla, and he pushed his crews incredibly hard. Round-the-clock drills, constant attack simulations.
Sounds intense.
It was. He encouraged deep diving, too, pushing the limits. But then U-12 nearly had a fatal accident diving way too deep, like 340 feet. So the OKM clamped down, restricted all U-boats to just 150 feet.
Ouch. How did Dönitz react?
He was furious. He made this bitter comment, something like, for the lessons you fail to learn in peace, you pay a high price in war. Prophetic words, as it turned out.
And the weapons.
Yeah.
The torpedoes were getting better, too.
Definitely. German engineers developed new ones with warheads almost double the size of the World War I versions. Packed a much bigger punch.
Anything else?
Yeah, 2 big things. They perfected an electric torpedo. It's a big advantage. No telltale trail of bubbles in the water. Much stealthier.
Okay, that's huge.
And they developed magnetic pistols for the warheads. The idea was they'd explode under the ship's keel, breaking its back. Supposedly much more lethal than hitting the side. Key word there is supposedly.
Right, foreshadowing.
Right.
So the stage is set. August 1939, war with Britain and France looks likely, despite Hitler's promises. How ready was Dönitz's U-boat force then?
Honestly, Not very. And they had maybe 27 ocean-going boats, but only about 20 were actually combat-ready. The Allies, by contrast, had something like 120 submarines combined.
Big difference.
Huge. Dunnet scraped together 34 boats to send out initially. And to avoid being spotted leaving Germany, the Atlantic boats had to take this really long detour, way up north around the British Isles, submerged by day, total radio silence.
Very cautious start.
And it didn't take long for things to go wrong, did it, that Athenia sinking?
Almost immediately.
Yeah.
September 3rd, 1939, the day war is declared. U-30, commanded by Fritz Julius Lemp, sinks the British passenger liner Athenia. Over 100 dead, a blatant violation of the prize rules they had just signed up to.
How did Berlin react? Hitler's reaction is revealing. Immediate decision, lie, cover it up. Raeder, Dönitz, even Goebbels, the propaganda minister, they were all involved in concocting this story, blaming the British Admiralty itself.
Wow. So much for the rules. And the Allied response. Churchill was back at the Admiralty then.
Yeah, Churchill immediately saw how serious the U-boat threat was. He believed Britain needed massive help from the U.S., and he started that famous private correspondence with President Roosevelt, trying to pull him closer to the war.
And their strategy?
Basically dust off the World War I playbook, mines, convoys, but they had a massive shortage of escort ships. Just a handful of old destroyers and sloops. Many didn't even have sonar, or ASDIC as the British called it.
But we also see the U-boat captains themselves becoming heroes almost instantly.
Absolutely. Dönitz chose Günther Prien and U-47 for that incredibly daring raid on Scapa Flow in October 39, sneaking into the main British naval base and sinking the battleship Royal Oak.
That must have been huge for morale in Germany.
Massive propaganda coup. Prien became a national hero overnight, but behind that carefully crafted image of success, a huge problem was brewing: those torpedoes.
Ah, yes, the magnetic pistols and the electric ones. You hinted they weren't perfect.
Far from it. This became the torpedo crisis. It was devastating for Dönitz and his crews.
What was happening?
Skippers started reporting premature torpedoes exploding before they even reached the target, or duds just failing to explode on impact. Dönitz was absolutely furious. He logged reports saying maybe 30% of torpedoes were faulty. His skippers were losing confidence in their main weapon.
That's disastrous.
He called it the most urgent of all the problems of U-boat warfare. And the invasion of Norway, the Narvik campaign in April 1940, really exposed it badly.
How so?
Prien, the hero of Scapa Flow, was there with U-47, found British warships basically sitting ducks in a fjord, fired 8 torpedoes, 0 hits, 8. His boat even ran aground temporarily. It was a fiasco.
So Dönitz's earlier comment about paying a high price.
Came back to bite them hard. He eventually had to bring in an outside scientist, Dr. Cornelius, basically made him torpedo dictator to sort out the mess. So yeah, that myth of early U-boat infallibility, it really masks this critical internal failure.
That is a huge revelation. Okay, so despite these German problems and the early exploits, the Allies weren't just sitting there. The fall of France in June 1940, that was a big strategic shift, wasn't it? Good for Dönitz.
Huge gift for Dönitz. Suddenly he had bases right on the French Atlantic coast, Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, Brest, cut down transit times dramatically, much easier access to the Atlantic shipping lanes.
But it also kicked the Allies into high gear.
Absolutely. Raised the stakes massively. The U.S., under Roosevelt, launched this awesome warship building program, the Two-Ocean Navy Act. Unprecedented scale.
And Britain made a big move, too, sharing technology.
A really bold decision, yeah. August 1940, the Tizard mission. Britain basically decided to share its most secret scientific breakthroughs with the Americans. The absolute jewel was a cavity magnetron. This little device made it possible to build small, powerful radar sets operating on centimetric wavelengths, perfect for putting in aircraft and smaller ships. It revolutionized ASW.
Wow. What else?
New depth charge designs, much more powerful explosives like RDX or Torpex, as the Allies call it, stuff that could really damage or sink a U-boat.
So a real pooling of resources.
Yeah.
And intelligence sharing followed.
It did. December 1940, a secret Anglo-American agreement to share cryptographic intelligence. But the biggest intelligence coup, the real history maker, came in May 1941, the capture of U-110.
U-110, what happened?
Commanded by Fritz Julius Lemp, the same guy who sank the Athenia. His boat got badly damaged by depth charges from British destroyers. He ordered the crew to abandon ship and scuttle it.
But they didn't scuttle it properly.
Exactly. British boarding parties got aboard before it sank and found gold. An intact naval Enigma machine, current code keys for crucial networks, code books, grid charts, everything.
Stand it to them.
Pretty much. An absolutely eye-popping haul, as Blair puts it. They cooked up a cover story, of course, but it gave the Allied codebreakers at Bletchley Park an unparalleled window into German U-boat operations for a critical period.
While the Allies are making these breakthroughs, what's Dönitz dealing with? Did he know about this intelligence leak?
No, not about the Enigma capture, not then. But he had plenty of other frustrations. Hitler kept diverting steel and resources to the army and the Luftwaffe. U-boat construction kept getting delayed. There weren't enough torpedoes.
And he needed air support, right?
Desperately. He needed long-range reconnaissance planes from the Luftwaffe to find the convoys for his U-boat wolf packs. But his relationship with Hermann Goering, the Luftwaffe chief, was terrible, basically non-existent. And the Focke-Wulf Condor aircraft they did get were often unreliable or diverted elsewhere. Constant struggle for resources.
Okay, then comes December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The U.S. is in the war. Hitler declares war on the U.S. a few days later. That opens up a whole new hunting ground, doesn't it?
A massive new front. And Dönitz saw his chance. This led to Operation Paukenschlag Drumbeat, a plan for a concentrated U-boat assault right on the American East Coast.
I guess an unprepared opponent.
Tragically, yes. Dönitz suspected the Americans would be slow to react, slow to implement convoys, blackout measures, and he was absolutely right. The East Coast was, initially, wide open.
Unprepared feels like an understatement. What did the U-boat commanders actually find when they arrived off the U.S. coast in early '42?
They couldn't believe their eyes. Skippers like Reinhard Hartigan in U-123, Richard Zapp in U-66, they reported waters thick with ships, often sailing fully lit up at night, no escorts, coastal cities blazing with light, silhouetting the ships perfectly.
Like shooting fish in a barrel.
Pretty much. Zapp sank the tanker Alan Jackson off North Carolina. 35 men died in a fireball. Then the Canadian liner Lady Hawkins, maybe 250 killed or died later. Hartigan wrote in his log about seeing no fewer than 20 steamers, some with their lights on. It was chaos. Ernst Kulls and U-130 even shelled refineries on the coast.
Just unbelievable vulnerability. What were the American defenses doing or not doing?
The ASW response was deeply problematic. Admiral Ernest King, the U.S. Navy chief, was initially very resistant to starting coastal convoys.
Why? Didn't they learn from the British experience?
He argued that the British had lost ships in poorly escorted convoys early on, and he felt an inadequately escorted convoy was actually worse than none at all. Plus, they just didn't have enough suitable escort ships ready immediately.
And the air cover issue.
Another huge problem. There was this, as Blair calls it, absurd and wasteful inter-service battle. The Army Air Forces controlled the land-based planes needed for coastal patrols, but their priority was offensive strategic bombing, not defensive anti-submarine work.
So they weren't interested or trained.
Largely untrained for ASW, yeah. And their contribution was minimal. Army Air Forces planes only sank one U-boat unassisted in American waters during the entire campaign. One.
Wow. And then to make everything worse, the Allied codebreakers hit a wall right at this critical moment.
Exactly. Terrible timing. Early in 1942, Bletchley Park lost the ability to read the main U-boat Enigma cipher, the Triton network, or SHARC, as the Allies called it. The Germans had introduced a new, more complex fourth rotor to the machines used by the Atlantic U-boats.
So just when drumbeat starts, the Allies go blind.
Precisely. If they'd still been reading SHARC, the Americans would have known immediately the scale of the attack, where the U-boats were concentrating Dönitz's tactics. It might have forced them to adopt convoys sooner, or at least route ships more effectively. A massive intelligence setback.
So adding up all those sinkings off the East Coast, what was the final verdict on drumbeat? Was it the crippling blow Dönitz hoped for?
It was incredibly costly, no doubt, especially in tankers 188 lost in the Americas in the first 8 months of 42 alone. Thousands of lives lost. But was it crippling to the overall war effort? No.
Why not?
Because the U.S. industrial machine was already kicking into high gear, the Maritime Commission's shipbuilding program was launching ships faster than the U-boats could sink them, even during this peak period. Losses were replaced amazingly quickly.
And ironically.
Ironically, the boats having the most success were the big Type IXs, the long-range ones Dönitz had initially resisted building. They were the only ones that could really operate effectively, so far from the French bases for extended periods.
Beyond the sheer numbers, the tonnage, the technology, you really see the human cost, the brutality in this phase, don't you, on both sides?
Absolutely. It wasn't just statistics. The U-boat war was incredibly brutal. You had merchant seamen dying in horrible ways, burned alive in tanker fires, freezing in the North Atlantic. And inside the U-boats, claustrophobia, constant fear, the terrifying sound of depth charges exploding nearby, unimaginable stress.
And that quote from Hitler
Yeah.
about shooting survivors.
Chilling, isn't it? January 1942, meeting with the Japanese ambassador. Hitler basically says, maybe we should just shoot merchant crewmen in their lifeboats to scare others from sailing. Our attitude cannot be ruled by any humane feelings, he said. It just shows the moral abyss total war can open up.
But the Allies were adapting, learning, sometimes getting lucky too.
They were. The capture of U-570 in August 41 is a strange example. A really green, seasick crew, plagued by mechanical problems, basically panicked under air attack and surrendered to a British Hudson aircraft.
Surrendered to a plane.
Yeah. The British managed to board it, found more useful intelligence, even though the German officers had apparently tried to scuttle it and then abandon ship first. Not exactly heroic.
And technology was improving on the Allied side.
Steadily. By September 41, British escorts started getting fitted with that new centimetric radar. It was still a bit temperamental, but a huge leap forward. Harder for U-boats to detect, much better resolution. Coastal Command was still short of the best long-range aircraft, but the American-built Catalinas were proving very capable.
Yeah. And the codebreakers. Even though they lost Shark later.
Even before the Shark blackout, they were performing miracles, but utterly swamped. Blair mentions they were sending desperate pleas directly to Churchill, asking for more staff, more resources. It highlights just how vital and how stretched that unseen intelligence battle was.
One last key area, the Bay of Biscay. That became a real danger zone for the U-boats themselves.
A massive headache for Dunits. It's the stretch of water the U-boats had to cross to get from their French bases out into the Atlantic and back.
And the British were waiting.
With aircraft increasingly fitted with radar, without decent German air cover, Dunits complained bitterly the bay had become a playground for the RAF. They were attacking U-boats on the surface, charging batteries, meeting supply boats, inflicting significant damage and casualties before the subs even reached their patrol areas. A constant drain.
So wrapping this up, our deep dive today really paints a much more complex picture, doesn't it? This early U-boat war was fueled by propaganda, yes, but also seriously hampered by technical screw-ups like the torpedo crisis. Shaped by big strategic decisions, leadership clashes, and just raw courage and desperation on all sides.
Absolutely. From those old prize laws being totally unworkable to the early war cover-ups like the Athenia, the intelligence breakthroughs like Room 40 and U-110, the technological race with radar and torpedoes, it was just this constant, brutal learning curve. Mistakes were made, paid for in lives, lessons were learned, slowly.
And what really stands out, I think, is how this situation, which looked pretty dire for the Allies early on, was turned around. It wasn't one single thing, was it?
Not at all. No silver bullet. It was a combination. Intelligence, definitely code breaking was huge. Technology, radar, better depth charges, long-range aircraft, strategy finally getting effective convoy systems working everywhere, and just sheer industrial power, especially from the U.S., churning out ships and planes and escorts faster than Germany could destroy them.
So the U-boat war, especially 1939 to 42, it wasn't just ships sinking ships. It was a battle of information, production lines, scientific innovation, and really tough moral choices under pressure.
Exactly. It shows that even a weapon as feared as the U-boat could be countered eventually through resilience, ingenuity, and adapting.
But it's also a stark reminder, isn't it? The human cost of underestimating a threat or failing to learn lessons from the past. Which makes you wonder, how much of that reality, that dynamic of threat, response, adaptation, and the hidden costs, how much of that applies to the global challenges we face today? Something to think about.